Gamers of the internet, I love a good deal. And it's hard to find a better deal than something being completely free. So I'm sure it comes as no surprise that I've collected every single weekly free Epic Games game for like 5 years now. Hundreds of games. An endless supply of pure gaming value. It almost feels like I'm stealing. For a gamer like me, this is basically Christmas coming every single week. So out of these pages and pages of free games for me to play, how many of them have I installed? 0? Well, today I aim to change that. I'm going to play 5 of these free games for an hour each. At the end of the hour, I'm going to determine if that game is something I want to keep playing more of, or if I'm going to uninstall it once again. My hard drive space is precious. I can only allow the highest quality content on it. For this video, I'm going to stick to the games that have been released for free in the past couple of months. That should give me a good benchmark for how good the Epic Games service is right now. So, without further ado, let's jump into our first game. The first game I'm playing is one of the newest at time of recording, Neko Ghost Jump. This is a hybrid 2D, 3D platformer that has you switching between perspectives in order to make progress through the levels. And as the name of the game might imply, you get to play as an adorable little cat living on an adorable cat-themed island. Getting to play as a cat is always going to be a huge win for me, as I'm very much a cat person. Unfortunately, that's kind of where my love for this game ends. I'm not really a platformer fan in general, I just don't get the same dopamine hits other people do when pulling off sick, nasty movement tech, so I haven't played very many platformers in general. And my lack of experience means that I'm not very good at them either. So I'm sure seeing my gameplay is making some of your eyeballs bleed, but I'm doing my best. To me, this game just has really awkward feeling movement. Something about the momentum of your character doesn't quite gel with me. I think it's fine for larger jumps, but anytime you need to do something with precision, it feels pretty bad. I do really like the concept of your moveset though. You have a basic jump that increases in power the longer you hold the button. You also have something called a boost, which is essentially a horizontal dash while you're in the air. And depending on when you activate the boost after jumping, you will also change your angle and distance of the jump. It's up to you to go full math mode and calculate the optimal jump arc. Apart from movement tech, this game also has some combat. And the combat kind of confuses me. You astral project your soul out of your body to fight enemies rather than fighting them directly. The thing is, your body is still vulnerable while you're in spirit form. I like the idea of needing to keep your body safe while in spirit form, but I'm not a fan of its implementation in this game specifically. So far, I haven't felt like the game has taken advantage of this mechanic in any meaningful way. Maybe if I got further in, the levels would become more interesting, and I would need to use this mechanic better, but in the time I played, I couldn't even beat the first boss. Which is a little embarrassing, and it will probably even get my gamer card revoked. I'm fairly confident you're supposed to beat this guy within like 15 minutes of starting, but I couldn't figure out his gimmick in time. And I mostly blame that for this game being pretty buggy. I had a handful of crashes to desktop, which ate up some of my time. And beyond that, this game just has a general lack of polish that kind of slowed everything down a little bit. I swear this isn't a skill issue, it's the game's fault I couldn't beat the first boss after 1 full hour. Even navigating the menus felt janky. Given that I'm not a platformer fan anyway, it doesn't really come as a surprise that I'm gonna have to uninstall Neko Ghost Jump. It's very cute, but it's kind of buggy, and it's not really a genre I care about anyway. That was a bit of a rough start. So for the next game, I'm going to pick something that I know is more up my alley to begin with. Next, I downloaded Mortal Shell, a Souls-like game that came out all the way back in 2020. What sets this Souls-like apart from all the others is the Harden ability, an ability that allows you to turn on nanomachines and become completely invincible for a brief moment. Then there is a short cooldown before you can use the ability again. It took me a while to understand this game's combat flow, but I finally figured it out after dying a whole bunch of times to Grisha, the first mini-boss. This game is paced very differently from Dark Souls 3 or Elden Ring. Mortal Shell is a much slower, much more deliberate game. It feels pretty similar to Dark Souls 2 in that way, but a whole hell of a lot more challenging because I don't have 300 hours of practice with Mortal Shell. In the 1 hour I played, I didn't get to experience too much of what I think the game is ultimately going to offer, but it certainly made some impressions. The combat did feel really nice and satisfying after I stopped playing like a total dunce. I only got to use one weapon, but it looks like there's at least 3 more that could be found in the first area, and probably additional weapons after that. Enemies had well-telegraphed moves, and the encounters all felt fair, though they weren't super interesting. Generally, you stumble upon a small group of humanoid dudes who JoJo pose in your general direction before walking towards you, menacingly. The whole experience was honestly kinda samey, not just the combat. I think the level I played was laid out pretty well, with lots of branching paths and verticality, but visually everything is so similar. It's a big swamp. It's way too easy to feel like a blind Dora the Explorer while playing this game. I cannot tell you how sections connect to each other. There just aren't enough distinct landmarks to make navigation feel natural. I think this might be intentional though, and it's supposed to give you the feeling of struggling to survive in a hostile environment. Another decision that leads to me feeling that way is how health recovery is handled. You don't have an Estus flask or equivalent. Instead, you pick wild mushrooms that will slowly regenerate your health over the course of the next 10,000 years. Luckily, your character is pretty damn tanky, so you don't really need any huge bursts of healing. Scraping by on these mushrooms between fights is totally fine. What's less fine is how you get more of them. They have static spawn points and they grow back on a timer. Again, I kinda feel like this is supposed to make you feel like fantasy Bear Grylls surviving off the land, collecting mushrooms and drinking your own piss whenever you can. But I'm not a super big fan of that feeling. At least the mushrooms should grow back instantly if you respawn. No. Speaking of consumables, I really like the familiarity mechanic. The more you use a consumable, the more you learn about how it works. This is a great way to encourage players to actually use their consumables instead of just hoarding them forever like a greedy dragon. Or a billionaire. I think Mortal Shell is a game I'm gonna keep installed for now. I want to see what other environments and weapons this game has to offer down the road. I've had a pretty good time with it so far, and I generally always like Souls-likes. I just hope the next game can live up to the pretty high bar this one set. The third game on my docket today is Mages of Mystralia. I'm not even going to bother burying the lead here. This game is really good. At its core, Mages of Mystralia is kind of a Zelda-like adventure. In this game, you play as a girl named Zaya on a quest to learn how to be a mage, something that's illegal in this fantasy land. Becoming a mage means learning lots and lots of spells. And although I only unlocked a single upgrade to my spells in this hour of playtime, That alone was enough to significantly change how my game was played. And just looking at this whole page of upgrades for things I haven't found yet, yeah, I think it's safe to say that this game has more depth than a 14-year-old watching their first M-rated anime. But let's be fair, I didn't actually play with many upgrades in my time in this game. I'm only speculating that this system is incredible. Let's instead talk about the parts I did play, and why they are so fucking awesome. First, I'm going to briefly touch on the music in Mages of Mystralia. It's incredible. To me, the music is both catchy and super charming. The composers really cooked here. It's so well made. I mean, the entire game is simply well made. This may be the most intuitively designed game I've played in years. Tutorials are super short and teach you almost entirely through visuals alone. It uses symbols and patterns for things without explaining them, but as soon as you see, for example, this red shield appear above an enemy, you know that they can't be damaged by the attack you just used. Or as soon as you see this puzzle interface, you understand exactly what the goal is to solve it. And oh my god, the puzzles! The small handful of puzzles I completed all felt creative as hell. The devs are certainly getting their money's worth out of every minute mechanic for their puzzle design. It's really impressive. Mages of Mystralia also does one of my favorite things an action-adventure or Metroidvania game can do. It takes the same abilities you use to solve puzzles, and also uses them to defeat enemies. This design choice marries the two halves of this game in such a way that makes you better at performing both. When I battled through my first few combat encounters, I thought that this game was going to be easy, and was probably made for babies. But if that's true, then I guess I'll have to rescind my right to vote, because I got my ass kicked a little bit later on. An enemy or two by themselves isn't really a problem. The difficulty in this game's combat comes from crowd controlling a whole platoon of angry green ghouls as they violently assault you both from range and in melee. This game really makes you feel like a peaceful protester surrounded by American law enforcement. Any good Zelda-like can't be complete without fun boss fights. And god damn it, Mages of Mystralia has that too. First up is Big Goblin Champion Lard. You can tell he's the leader because he eats the most donuts. You need to dodge his underlings as well as his own attacks, and if possible, take advantage of environmental exploding barrels to deal additional damage. But if you want to ignore the barrels, you can! It's just an option that adds player agency if you have the skill to take advantage of it. I ended my play session fighting the Curse-Rotted Greatwood from Dark Souls 3, a boss that relies on summoning allies. Allies that you've already learned how to fight earlier in the level, but not on this scale. It's a real test of your skills and knowledge, how good you are at crowd controlling and managing lots of enemies. If you haven't learned how to manage movement and spellcasting simultaneously by this point, you're gonna have a bad time. I love this game, and it is absolutely staying installed. This entire video feels worth it just because of this game alone. I am so excited to spend more time in this game, but I'm gonna have to wait because I still have 2 more other games to play in this video. So let's continue on. Garden Story is a game where you play as a grape in a charming little produce-themed village. Honestly, 1 hour was definitely not enough time to fully grasp what this game is trying to do. I got a pretty good idea, but there's some things I'm yet to fully comprehend. To me, this game feels kinda like a cross between Stardew Valley and maybe Zelda? Or some kind of RPG? Firstly, this game has a lot of narrative to go through in its opening hour. I think most of my play session was spent yapping with NPCs. This is a game that really wants you to get invested in its characters. And I did, even though it felt like they were talking my ears off. Once the NPCs take off your training wheels, the game becomes about doing tasks on a daily schedule. On each day, you have a handful of requests that you're encouraged to complete before going to bed and starting the next day, though you don't have to do them. The tasks I got in my brief time playing revolved around defeating enemies and collecting specific resources for the village. I also caught a short glimpse into the RPG mechanics on display here. Part of character building comes from equipping memories, which will change your stats. It seems like memories are going to be unlocked by doing specific things with specific NPCs, and, well, creating memories with them. Garden Story is a very well-made game. It's charming, tranquil, and honestly pretty cozy. And I know it's got more going on that I haven't seen yet. It seems to be pretty narrative-driven, so I bet there's a lot more characters and places to visit. With that said, cozy games are kind of a blind spot for me. I've never played Stardew or a different farming sim, and while this isn't a farming sim, it feels cut from the same cloth. I'm not really sure if Garden Story is the game I want to play as my first cozy game. But who knows? Maybe I'll have an itch for something relaxing like this after a stressful day. So for the time being, Garden Story can stay installed. It helps a lot that this game has a minuscule file size. It's only 89 megabytes. For context, my hour of footage playing this game is over 10 times that size. Let's be real. For 89 megabytes, everybody might as well have this installed. No other game on this list is going to be nearly this small. Speaking of which, it's time for the last one. And the final game I'm giving a shot today is Undying. This is a game about surviving in the zombie apocalypse by looting, crafting, and managing your basic necessities as time ticks by. More than anything else, this game reminded me a little bit of This War of Mine. A big reason for that is the framing of the story. In this game, you play as a mother who needs to take care of her child as well as herself. That means managing 2 people's hunger, 2 people's thirst, and 2 people's health. In order to not starve to death, you'll need to hit up the town and dig through trash to find your next meal. Because nothing says survival like impersonating a raccoon. To get through this newest strain of COVID, you're gonna have to do more than just look for food. You also gotta craft pieces of wood into stronger weapons, sheets of scrap metal into beefier vehicles, and pieces of cloth into deeper pockets? The ultimate goal is to survive until you can be evacuated in 60 days when the game ends. This is a tried and true gameplay loop. People love survival crafting type games. Now, I know not many people like time limits, but those that do tend to love them. So the Venn diagram of people who like time limit and survival games will probably like Undying quite a lot. I found it to be simultaneously very tense while also weirdly relaxing. Kinda like how you feel after being in a massage chair for a while that's turned on to be just a little bit too strong. Though they haven't played a large role this early on, you will have to fight zombies on occasion. I quite like this game's combat. It's dead simple, but I think that works to the game's benefit. The challenge comes from spacing and timing your attacks. Honestly, it reminds me of like a simplified Silent Hill. And anything that reminds me of Silent Hill is gonna get at least a soft glazing. I think this game's only real negative is the voice acting and script. Undying was developed by a Chinese studio, and you can tell English doesn't come quite so naturally to them. To their credit, the English is totally serviceable. Nothing sounded broken to me, or grammatically incorrect, or misspelled, or anything like that. But everything was written and delivered very flatly. A setup like this, where you're a mother trying to protect her son through an apocalypse, is a setting that can be filled with heart-wrenching writing if it's done right. But Undying just can't hit that mark. There is a huge lack of emotion with the English writing and voice acting. I'd be willing to bet the Chinese version is much more emotionally resonant, but I can't prove that without learning Chinese myself. And as an American, I'm obligated to only understand English while pretending that other languages and cultures don't exist. Undying seems pretty damn solid from the hour I played, but honestly, I don't see myself coming back to it. Survival games like this aren't really my thing. I don't dislike them, but I usually get pretty bored with them after not too long. I'm going to have to give this game a gentleman's clap, as I mercilessly rip it from my hard drive. And there we go. 5 games from the Epic Games Store that were totally free and that I've never even thought about until now. Of the games I played today, Mages of Mystralia was absolutely the standout highlight. It's available on most platforms, and I really think it's worth your time and money based purely on my first hour. Now, originally, I was actually going to play 10 free Epic games, but after I played 9 of them and wrote down all of my thoughts, I realized that was going to make for an insanely long video. So I'm breaking it up. If all goes well, I should have part 2 out next week. But I also gotta do a lot of other important stuff, like rolling for more characters on Genshin Impact. So who knows if I'll get around to it. To tide you over until that part 2 video comes out though, why don't you try watching one of my other videos? I got a lot of stuff about video games, and a lot of other stuff about anime. So I'm sure something I've made will be to your liking. But even if you just leave me a like and a subscribe and watch this video till the end, that's fantastic too. Thank you so much for being here. Please remember to stay positive and have a wonderful day, everyone.